Sunday, November 12th, promises to be an interesting day for lots of reasons. Many of the sites that we will see have to do with Jewish history, Israeli history, or just even current events in the nation state of Israel. Our Christian heritage will be highlighted, but the events of the life of Jesus may take a slight back seat for this day only. Not completely. Sunday, November 12th, promises to be a very Jewish day. We'll be staying in Jerusalem right around the corner from St. George's College. St. George's College is perhaps the preeminent institution of the Episcopal Church in Jerusalem and the Middle East. It is a place where bishops from all over the Anglican Communion go, gather, hold meetings. There are students from all over the world who come to this place to celebrate, to live into the heritage of Episcopalians in the Holy Land. And just think, we'll be right around the corner within easy walking distance. Now, this day is one after we have left the Galilee, the northern part of the nation of Israel. We'll be headed to many places of Jewish interest. You see Tel Aviv, Jaffa, Yaffo right there on the left, sort of up toward the top. You can see Jerusalem there in about the middle of the picture. We'll be going to Qumran, tell you more about it, Masada, the Dead Sea, sometimes called the Sea of Salt, and even the city of Jericho, the place where the walls came tumbling down. Now, along the Dead Sea itself, there are many places to come see. Qumran, En-Gedi, the Dead Sea itself, even Masada. We'll also go to the town of Jericho. That's a little further north than this map would show. But if you take Qumran and just move a little further north. By the way, K's and Q's, moving from Hebrew letters to Latin characters, is sometimes a little difficult. So even though we tend to spell Qumran with a Q, this map happens to do it with a K. Q's and K's, roughly the same sound. What's Qumran? Well, it's a national park in the state of Israel, about 1.5 miles northwest of the Dead Sea. It's the place where the discovery of the famous Dead Sea Scrolls was found. It was a monastery, maybe even a complex of monasteries built out in the wilderness. You can see caves right here in this picture, right about in the middle of the picture, that little black, that's a cave, an opening into rooms where people tried to move away. What were they moving away from? Their certainty that the destruction of Israel was coming soon. So this is about the same time as Jesus. We think that the people who lived here were Essenes. We know a lot about Pharisees and Sadducees. They're mentioned in the New Testament a lot. The Essenes aren't mentioned whatsoever in the New Testament, and they weren't a numerically large group, but they had a thriving community, even if it was a bit smaller. They moved out into the desert. When we get to Qumran, this is a place of archaeological excavations. You can see they've uncovered some of the stone walls. This particular building doesn't have roofs anymore. You can see what the land looked like, and there's caves in the bottom right, and in the top right you can sort of see what general what do I want to say, a landscape view of the whole thing. Now, to me, that looks an awful lot like Palo Duro Canyon up in the panhandle of Texas, but I'll let you make up your mind about that. What are the Dead Sea Scrolls? Well, we'll get a chance to see some of them. The Great Isaiah Scroll, the picture of which is there to the right, is the largest single piece of the book of Isaiah that was found as part of the Dead Sea Scroll. They caused a complete revolution in biblical studies. We understood so much more about the composition and the process for how the Old Testament was gathered together, how the books came together. It gave us an insight into the life of Jewish sects, various Jewish groups. We tend to think of, again, Pharisees and Sadducees as being the two large groups. But actually, at the time of Jesus, there were a wide variety of Jewish groups. In sociological terms, they're referred to as sects. These sects went from quite liberal, those who were very assimilated into the Roman Empire and their ways, to those that had fierce opposition to pagan ways. We'll also visit the town of Masada. Masada, Masada was the last stand in the first Jewish revolt around the year 70 or so, after the time of Jesus, as Christianity was beginning to spread out. The Jews had simply had enough of the Roman Empire. They revolted against the Roman Empire, and they didn't have a very successful revolt whatsoever. There were some military forces that retreated to this mountaintop fortress located at Masada, where they would try to hold out against the Roman army. It became famous for showing the determination, the perseverance of Jewish folks. Today, it's a national park, extremely popular in the land of Israel. The fortress of Masada was built by Herod the Great sometime between the years 37 and 31 before the Common Era, before Christ, before that common dating system. The last stand of the Jews against the revolt, in their revolt against the Roman Empire, was made sometime in the year 73 to 74 of the Common Era. Most of the information we have about this battle, about the progress of it all, comes from the historian Josephus. He's a Jewish historian, fluent in Greek, who left us quite an accounting of the wars of the Jews. The site of Masada itself was pretty much ignored until about 1838, and that's when archaeologists began to pay some attention to it. Its full excavation, as we have it today, only happened in the year 1959. So from the year 74 until 1838, this has just been totally ignored, and modern scientific evidence only takes place since 1959. Now, I mentioned it was the last stand. You may know the story of the Jewish revolt at Masada. It's completely surrounded by legions of the Roman army, no escape, no possibility of getting away, no possibility of resistance. The night before it became clear the Roman armies were going to launch their last offensive against the citadel, the day before they were going to invade, the inhabitants got together, and knowing the brutality and the cruelty of the Roman army, they decided that rather than submit themselves to the control of the legions, they would kill themselves. And so the entire garrison, men, women, children, they all committed suicide or were killed by other people, willingly killed by other people. It's come down in Jewish folklore as a sign of the determination of the Jews, of the strength of the Jews. Even if they can't win, they don't allow you to win. It's still true today that when forces of the Israeli, or members of the Israeli Defense Forces get ready to take their oath of swearing into the IDF, that they come to Masada and take the oath on this sacred ground. That's a tradition that was started by Israel's first defense minister, the legendary Moshe Dayan. He's the fellow who wore the eye patch. We'll also travel to the Dead Sea. Now, as you can imagine, the folks there don't particularly care for the name the Dead Sea. It seems like it's kind of a downer for them. They prefer to simply call it the Sea of Salt. And salty it is. You can see here on the left picture the salt that is washing up on the shore, or maybe I should say drying out at the shore. In the bottom right, there is so much salt in this water that you can float in the water. Here's a fellow whose neither feet nor any part of his body is touching the bottom. He's not wearing a life jacket, and yet he can float. You see what the beach looks like. In the last couple of years, the Dead Sea has really shrunk up a little bit due to climate change. It's gotten much smaller, so the beaches have gotten much bigger. It's still a fairly popular site for Jewish folks, Israeli folks, to go to today. Very high in all sorts of minerals. Now, how did folks use the Dead Sea or think of the Dead Sea back in ancient times? Did they go there to soak in the mineral waters as a spa? There's some evidence of that. Also some evidence that it was an industrial complex, that's where they went to get their salt. There were trade routes that went over the sea, so a lot of boats, because you didn't have to worry quite so much about the boat sinking, went right across the sea. The sea itself is not incredibly large. It's about 31 miles long, about 9 miles wide. In Texas, we call that a good-sized lake. There are some hotels that have been built around the Dead Sea. For a long time, people thought this would be a great tourist attraction. Some of the hotels are still there. Some of them are fairly nice. But the desert climate and the heat, and besides the sea itself, just the lack of other things to see and do mean that they've never really taken off. Jordan tried to build up around the Dead Sea when they were in control of the land. The Dead Sea now forms part of the border between the occupied territories of Israel and Jordan itself. So it's right on the lines between two nations. Now, we'll also head to Jericho, the place where Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho and the walls come tumbling down. Jericho may be the oldest city in the world. We have good reason to believe that it dates back to about 9,000 years before the Common Era, about 11,000 years ago from our time. There have been 20 successive settlements built here. As the archaeologists dig through, they find evidence of 20 successive settlements made. The city of Jericho was part of Alexander the Great's private estates. He came through this area before the time of Jesus and conquered the area. He turned the city of Jericho into his own private property. Later, the city of Jericho, when taken over and run by the Roman Empire, was given by Mark Antony to the Egyptian queen Cleopatra. And you might remember the Liz Taylor, Richard Burton movie Antony and Cleopatra, or perhaps you know the Shakespeare play Antony and Cleopatra. Lovers, Antony trying to impress Cleopatra. The city itself was first rented by Herod the Great from the Roman Empire and then given to Herod the Great as a reward for his loyal service to the city of Rome. Now, modern Jericho, you see to the left, there's a minaret right there in the middle. You can see the location of Jericho in the upper right here. So the city of Jerusalem, you'll notice, has both an east side and a west side. The west side is the modern city. The east side is the ancient city, and the east is all inside the occupied territories. Although, to be fair, both sides, Israeli and Palestinian, claim Jerusalem as their capital. You'll notice the city of Bethlehem is just a short distance south of Jerusalem, just a few miles. Jericho is to the north and quite a bit farther east of Jerusalem, east into the west bank. Now that's confusing. From Jerusalem you go east, but you see the Jordan River there on the right, forming border between the West Bank territories and the nation of Jordan. The West Bank territories are claimed by Palestinians as part of their future nation, and currently they're occupied by the nation of Israel. The little inset reminds us that the Jerusalem municipality, the city of Jerusalem, occupies both sides of this border. It's one city, not two cities, one city split between two nations. And you'll notice some of the archaeological sites in Jericho, the drive, how tourists are there, buildings that have come down. I mentioned Jericho may be the oldest city in existence. Is it the very first city built with a wall around it? Perhaps. It's the first city we have any record of having walls around it. Who's occupied the city of Jericho? Well, over time, Babylonians, Persians, Hasmodeans. The Hasmodeans, that's the name we give to the Jews right before Rome came in and took over. Arabs have occupied the city and made it theirs. Crusaders, likewise, and around the turn of the millennium, about 1100 or so. The Ottoman Turks came in and made it an Ottoman city. The Brits came in. It was a major administrative hub for the British Empire when the Brits had their mandate here. Jordanians made this an important city. Modern Israelis, Palestinians today. It is an ancient city, and it has adapted to the times, perhaps. It's not only an ancient city, it's also a modern city. In 1945, the population of Jericho was only 3,000 people, fairly small. By 1961, that population had grown to 10,000. The current population today is about 20,000 people. And you'll notice, even though I've shown you lots of scenes, photographs with archaeological ruins and people walking around, there are modern streets, there are cars. Jericho is a modern city as well. Then at the end of this day, it's been a busy Sunday. We've seen lots of things. We'll head back to the hotel. But what a Sunday, November 12th. Looking forward to it.